because I tend to find if you go out and talk to people around you, you get the barometer of what's going on. You know, you talk to people in your local economy, and one of the things I've always noticed is the Suffolk economy itself, and this is something I don't know whether you'd agree with this or not, but I tend to find the Suffolk economy is slightly sheltered from the worst of it, but also sheltered slightly from the best of it as well. Absolutely. You know, there's a lesser variance in terms of what goes on here. We don't feel the full force of the recession immediately or for as long, but we also don't necessarily get the full force of the boom and, you know, the increase in the economy. Is that something that you've seen, that perhaps Cambridge and Leeds are potentially more? I should imagine Cambridge must be very volatile if R&D budgets get cut, or?
Actually, Cambridge isn't hugely volatile because of the strength of the university and its impact upon the local economy. Cambridge University is massively powerful and exceptionally wealthy, with very deep pockets, and readily has associations with
a lot of goodwill as well. You know, it's been around a long time.
But that sustains a lot of the businesses, so that doesn't actually have the volatility that you might expect, despite the fact of the sectors it's in. However, I completely agree with your sentiments on Suffolk being protected. It does seem that I think if you look at the industries in the area, you know, predominantly you're looking at agriculture and obviously the shipping and
shipping, insurance and things like that. Yeah.
And actually those maintain, and they are relatively recession proof. Everyone will still have to eat, and everyone equally has to have all of the certain things delivered and transported and exported.
So logistics is paramount, yeah.
So actually they do maintain. Obviously what they have to battle against is obviously all fuel price increases and things like that, which are passed on to the consumer. But largely those sort of areas are relatively recession proof. You're still going to have a demand for them. So if they have that, then actually a lot of the rest of the area also rides on the back of it.
Yeah.
You know,
with just coming back, I mean, there was all the furore of the budget, as there always is, and then, you know, a few days later, the small print people saying, "Hang on, this isn't as good as it looks," and then, you know, the dust settles. Has there been anything that's come out of the settled dust that surprised you or potentially colleagues at Beaton's?
Actually, this budget was slightly different from most, because most of the budgets, everything's been leaked before. But actually this one wasn't as leaky in some areas as before. We still obviously had a few heads up on things, but yes, we've had the granny tax and the pasty tax, which have grabbed the headlines, but actually those are relatively small potato in the whole scheme of things. I think one of the largest areas that we're going to see people having issues with is, and it's starting to hit the headlines now, is the charities and the restrictions on tax reliefs coming through. And I think that one of the worrying areas on that is if people have got two businesses and one of them's not doing very well, that actually they are not going to be particularly helped out by the way that these tax rules are going to change. So you can't have one business helping the other one keep going, and effectively in that revenue looking at a net position for the two. They're going to say you can't actually have all of those reliefs to offset.
Yeah, you can be propping up one to reduce your corp tax liability. Yeah,
absolutely. So essentially, you know, those changes, it's due to go to consultation, and this is the way that the Inland Revenue are now moving. That they announce a change and then they say, "Is it all right with you? Come back with any queries that you might have." So they issue some consultation documents in the summer, and we shall all complain vehemently about that. And I think one of the concerning areas is obviously the charities. Charities benefit from 10% of their donors give, I think, 90% of the money.
Large philanthropy payments.
And actually, that's an area that's going to hit dramatically. So I think there'll be a huge lobby on that, and I think that's something relatively concerning. Obviously, you know, you do some charity work as well.
Yes, you know, I've just recently made a fairly reasonable charitable donation, you know, so I may need to talk to you off air about that. But, I mean, just sort of coming back to something specific that comes out of this is that, you know, we hear a lot about youth unemployment and all the rest of it, stuff like that. And there seems to be a lot of goodwill amongst the government at the moment for the small businesses and the entrepreneurs and the kind of, you know, micro businesses to start. What advice, aside from getting a good accountant, would you give to someone looking to start a business now?
It is difficult times, but essentially you've got to be lean, and you've got to be looking to run the business as efficiently as you can from day one. So I would be very sceptical about going on expensive courses and things like this.
Private number plates for your car.
Absolutely. But looking at the relatively simple things that are out there and cost efficient. There are courses that are run by local organisations that will give you training in certain areas. I think social media is certainly a burgeoning market where you can relatively...
You can behave like a bigger business and be trading out your back bedroom, sort of, essentially.
Absolutely, and relatively cost-free. You know, before you used to have to look at hundreds of pounds to put adverts in newspapers and magazines to get a presence locally. Well, actually now you can do it relatively inexpensively through the social media outlets.
Just a quick question, and this is something that I've heard people raise and stuff like that. When's the time to go limited? You've got a little business, it's going, it's ticking along well, it's showing good signs. Is there, for someone sitting at home watching this, you know, a business owner or something, is there a hard and fast rule? With my recruitment business, I started as limited. With my IT business, I didn't. But is there a hard and fast rule that says, you know, at this point, you should be doing X?
I think you have to look at what are the benefits of being limited then. And the benefits of being a limited company are limited liability and also a slightly different tax treatment of how you can be taxed on profits and take money out of the business.
So it's more tax advantageous to pay yourself through dividends as a limited company director than it is through a PAYE scheme as a partnership or something?
Absolutely, and equally we've recently seen in the London Mayor elections that there have been lots of disputes about that because the different candidates are treating their payments in different manners and having tax advantages. But the limited liability aspect is a key thing because essentially if your industry that you work in has risks involved, you can mitigate some of those risks through insurance, but equally, you know, if you're not a limited company, your house is ultimately at risk and all of your other
personal
assets.
Yeah.
So actually the decision is not necessarily whether you're making £20,000 of profit or £30,000 of profit, but actually is it likely that there would be a claim on you that might put the rest of your family's assets at risk.
So things that would fall outside of public liability insurance and employers, you know, insurance and stuff like that. Okay.
Absolutely.
One other question: if you're someone sitting at home watching this wanting to become an accountant, you know, someone that's sitting there maybe studying at the moment, school leaver or something like that, thinking, well, Dad's an accountant, I'll follow in his footsteps. Any hard and fast tips, golden nuggets of knowledge, or anything that you've seen that surprised you about the industry, or just some advice?
I would say it's a good industry to go into because it is a very varied industry. There are many different facets of it. I work in the tax field, but equally you can deal with insolvency and try and help businesses that are struggling. Equally corporate finance to try and buy and sell businesses. Equally auditing and accountancy work, or there's an absolute wide range of sort of business activities that you can assist with, but equally a number of different people who you can come across. And you know, I deal with the little old lady who living on a pension and has some savings to I've got a couple of FTSE 100 directors and large PLCs. And each has a unique sort of outlook, and it is a very rewarding career in that respect. But what advice would I give? It is just to study hard and to actually to try and think of beyond actually the numbers. It's not a process. You're not just going through the numbers and producing a balance sheet, a profit and loss account. What you're looking at is how can you really help this business?
Interpreting it into real world stuff rather than two-dimensional figures on a spreadsheet. Yeah.
Because you're not going to differentiate yourself from the crowd if you can just do the bog standard work. You have to be able to give them something that they can use, management style information, so telling them actually your profit, your gross profit on what you're selling your food at your public house, you're not selling it for more, enough money because your costs are this, and actually the margins on that business should be higher, and things like that. Knowing the industries.
Okay. And following on from an earlier question, I mean, outsourcing. At what point, a business owner sitting at, might be sitting at home watching this, thinking, "Got my own business, it's going quite well. I've done all the accounts." Is there again this kind of golden rule or a benchmark as to when someone should think, "You know what, I want to outsource it"? I mean, for me personally, I outsource my accounts straight away because I'm terrible at maths. But, and I remember doing my first VAT return and I did it for the wrong 3 months because it's a month after, and and that kind of made me lose interest very quickly in it. But is there a kind of ballpark as to when someone should consider that or not?
I know you'll be thinking that I'm not giving you any ballparks or figures here, but it is actually individual cases. But in terms of outsourcing, it is a valuable thing to do, to be able to pass the financial control, and it's a huge range of where and how much you want to do. At Beaton's, we do everything from chasing debts for some people, picking up the phone and our staff are speaking as if they are from another organisation.
Sort of thing.
Absolutely, raising invoices or processing information to provide management accounts on a VAT returns. So it's a huge scope of where you might go with that, but when would you do it? Well, it is very difficult to actually say at a certain point. If your business becomes a point where you feel that you're spending more time doing the administration and the finances of it, and actually you're not able to focus on
chargeable work that pays bills,
what your business is actually generating in profit, then you might wish to look there. Equally, it could be that you have a bookkeeper who does a little bit of work for you, but you feel that actually either they're going to retire or there's a case that they're not able to cope with the volume of information.
So could someone, just for argument's sake, outsource just the credit control bit for it?
You can outsource whatever aspects, but what you have to do is you have to have a system that works, that will allow that aspect of it to integrate with,
allow you guys to do your job basically,
but also allow the business to maintain control of that information, to be able to see it. So there isn't a hard and fast rule, but there is definitely merits in doing so, and it covers it. There's an advantage in doing so because you're not having an employee to have to deal with. So if you're not having an employee, then there's a whole team who are dealing with it. So holidays, pregnancy and maternity leave and things like this are all taken from your worries, and that's someone else's worry, the outsourcer's worry.
Okay, well, something I like to chuck in is a bit of a random question. What did you want to be when you left school? Did you want to be an accountant?
I didn't. I think I would have been quite worried if it was. No, I didn't, because I didn't know much about accountancy. In fact, my father was he started off as a mechanic. It was a very different world, but he always said that he didn't want me to get my hands dirty in the same manner that he did. I wanted to be a footballer, who didn't? Unfortunately, my father was telling me that we need a proper job. So I excelled at maths at school, and I had always a flair for it, so it was a natural progression to me.
Was it something you fell into, or?
Partly, I did take a business degree, so
followed on
it came through that really, and it was a natural progression once we reached that, but it was close. I could have quite easily taken an artificial intelligence computer degree. Could have been a different world.
Well, thank you very much for coming in, Andrew. It's been a pleasure to see you, and I'm sure we'll have you back again at some point. But ladies and gentlemen, Andrew Diver from Beaton's Accountants, and thank you very much for coming in.
No problem. Thank you.